CNC Consultants Intermark silhouettes kicked off our day at Lydden. It was good to see Lewis Smith making a comeback, even though qualifying didn't quite go as planned. An early red flag to recover the spinning duets of Paul Coxidge and Phil Spinks allowed drivers a second go at setting a quick time. In the end, Ray Harris annexed pole position, with Richard Smith lining up alongside. Row 2 saw Keith White in his BMW Z4 joined by Colin Smith, who lost 1 lap time due to track limits. Fifth quickest was a rather happy Mick Robertson, as he just edged out Lewis Smith. Row 4 contained Ruben Taylor, who was still less than a second behind the pole position time. Then came Paul Coxidge, going well at his local track. Completing the grid would be Phil Spinks, Volker Tim, Steve Phillips and Nick Bass. Race 1 saw a clean start by Harris, who led away from Richard Smith and Lewis Smith, who was already up to third. A lap later and Lewis passed his father and chased after Ray. Richard lost another place to Colin Smith, who is not related to Lewis or Richard. So we now had Harris, Lewis, Colin and Richard, followed by White, Taylor, Coxidge and Robertson. Spinks was an early retiree on lap 3, followed a couple of laps later by Colin. Meanwhile, Robertson had eased past Coxidge, only to pull off on lap 13. Harris had the measure of Lewis as the gap hovered around 3 seconds. Then on lap 12, Richard appeared back in second place, as Lewis had a slowish lap. Nick Bass had an interesting tussle with Volker Tim, who unfortunately ended on lap 16, as Nick retired. Steve Phillips had them both in his sights for most of the race. So the final result was a win for Harris, with Richard Smith second, winning the senior class, followed by Lewis Smith, White, Taylor, Coxidge, Tim and Phillips. Race 2 should have had Steve Phillips and Volker Tim on the front row, but probably wisely they elected to start nearer the back. This left Coxidge momentarily at the front, but by the end of lap 1, Lewis Smith was in the lead, chased by Harris, Taylor and Richard. The white and blue Mercedes was soon up to third, whilst Colin was making good progress, quickly climbing up to 5th behind Taylor. Lap 5 and Tim retired, joined 3 laps later by the luckless Spinks. Up front, Lewis used his racecraft to hold the lead for 10 laps. But gradually Harris closed in and made his move on lap 11. It was then a high-speed battle as the burgundy Mercedes clung on to the blue Ginetta. In the end, Lewis had to settle for second, but it was a very good race. Richard Smith just held off Colin for third, winning the senior section again. Taylor had the measure of White for 5th. Completing the finishers were Robertson, Coxidge and Phillips, the latter winning the CNC Consultants Driver of the Day award. The Saloons and TinTops had a welcome bunch of returnees, appearing for the first time this year. Mike Thurley brought along his potent Castrol liveried escorts and managed to snatch pole position from Rod Birley on the last lap of qualifying. The mixed track conditions possibly accounted for some drivers being slightly circumspect. Line up third would be Glenn Rossiter in the ex-Chris Whiteman Honda Civic. The car has been repanelled and painted black and red and looked very smart. It was therefore the quickest TinTop. 4th spot went to Tony Skelton in his Renault Clio Turbo. The veteran racer celebrated his 90th birthday on Friday and provided us with an interesting interview into his long racing history. 5th quickest was Tom Burgess, going well in his father's MK2 Ford Escort. Alongside him would be Sam Hayward in his usual Renault Megane. Next up was Terry Waller in his Ford Fiesta Turbo, with teammate Adrian Matthews in his Volvo C30. Completing the top 10 were Andy Woods-Dean, who brought his mighty Holden Commodore, and Colin Claxton's MK1 Turbo Escort. Sadly, Colin would be a non-starter, as a fuel rail had fractured. Completing the runners would be Graham Richardson in his Honda Civic, Martin Reynolds in his MK2 Ford Escort, Steve Walden's BMW E30, Dominic Ryan's Ford Fiesta Turbo, Lee Clue's Audi TT and Ian Seals' Ford Fiesta. Race 1 saw Birley blast into the lead by Jesson's drift. Thurley clung on to his boot lid, and there was barely a second between the two cars for the first 5 laps. Gradually the 4-wheel drive Escort pulled away as attention focused on the battle for third. Burgess squeezed past Rossiter, but the Honda driver held on well until the latter part of the race. Further back, the progress of Martin Reynolds was interesting. From 12th, he made it up to 5th, finishing close behind Rossiter. Skelton had an interesting first lap when he selected the wrong gear and watched several cars go past. His climb back from 10th to 6th was good to watch. Waller had a steady race to take 7th, whilst the first lap's runner was Hayward in 8th. Sam winning Class T1 and just holding off Adrian Matthews. Ryan had a race-long battle with Walden, whilst Clue kept Seal at bay. Both Richardson and Woods-Dean retired late on. Race 2 again saw Birley take the lead as Thurley slotted into 2nd. After 7 laps, Rod held a 3-second lead, but it was Burgess now in 2nd. Tom having squeezed past Mike going into Chessons on lap 6. Lap 8, and it all changed up front as Birley suddenly slowed and pulled off. A sudden vibration had alerted Rod to a possible steering issue. Burgess therefore took the lead with Thurley close behind. Rossiter was charging along in 3rd, pursued by Skelton and Waller. Sadly, Reynolds had non-started due to a coil pack issue and Woods-Dean pulled off after 1 lap. Burgess eased away from Thurley to take a 5-second win, also earning the Driver of the Day prize. Rossiter took 3rd, winning the TinTops section as Waller got past a slowing Skelton. Terry took the Cannon's TinTop Driver of the Day award. Walden got the better of Ryan this time, while Seal, winning TP, beat Clue, who won Class A. Richardson again retired just before the end. The clerk of the course was full of praise for the good driving standards, as all 4 races ran incident-free. Next up for the Saloons and TinTops is Brands Hatch on August the 16th, whilst the Silhouettes are now getting their own races at Castle Combe on August Bank Holiday Monday the 25th.